Morning, Melinda. How are you today?
I'm good, and you, Dean?
Very well. Dean Boles here from Ontario. We're adventuring into about 6 weeks of this COVID-19 moment, and I'm pretty pleased and very appreciative to have Melinda Harrison with us, author, Olympian, and coach. And we've been running a series of talks to help the athletes and coaches and volunteers, officials, whoever else is tuning in, just to have some thought-provoking moments to consider some things, some tools. And yeah, so how are you? You're well?
Yeah, I am good. It's been, both an exciting week and a sad week. I mean,
Yeah,
the loss of Kevin is significant for Swimming Ontario and for Swimming Canada and for our athletes.
yeah,
It was quite a shock. I had a couple of nights where I just went, wow.
yeah, yeah.
And then, of course, my book got published on Tuesday.
Oh,
And
isn't that wonderful?
so that was really exciting, except
Yeah,
for, I've had author copies of my book for a week or for a month. So, in terms of actually being able to go to a store and say, wow, here it is on the shelf, that
hmm
didn't happen. But it was still exciting. My kids put on a Zoom call with my whole entire side of the family, and
Ah,
we had a little celebration.
yeah, and you'll never forget this launch. You'll never forget this launch.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. So just going back to last week when we were talking about some choosing positive influences and talking about choice and things like that, I did my exercise and I felt, I think I
Fantastic.
closed off last week that, I thought this would be a great exercise to start off the day. And I hadn't been really doing anything, but I felt, just to share a little bit on this, it said, think back to a few weeks ago, what were the positive influences? And throughout the process, I said my staff is one, and our performance partners such as Swimming Canada and the Canadian Sport Institute, to name a few. So that was really a positive, I would say, positive influence for myself. Then the other piece was think of yourself today and what are the positive influences. I would say it's the new support connections that I've made over this period, such as you, Melinda. I mean, I've known you for a long time. I've known what you've been doing, but you've really helped in many of the talks we've had. Me personally, to look at things a little bit differently, take a pause, and look through things. Obviously, with Swimming Canada, our executive director council across the country have been meeting weekly. We've been meeting weekly with Swimming Canada. That's been a positive. And then just our discussions with our facilities, TPAS, Raphael Torrey, who's the general manager for high performance sport at TPAS, just, helping us see what is taking place, what is going to help go forward. And I'd have to say my board of directors are from Ontario. Then the third part was around the negative influences creeping in. And I would just say timing. It's been, and the guessing, a lot of guessing goes on, the delays. And I basically, I'm not the only one who's coined this, but I would say right now, some days I feel, or moments, and maybe this week was one of them, 2020 has not been kind to anyone. And,
Right.
and that's a hard part. And then the other thing is what has changed, not changed. And I think we are seeing progress in what we're hearing from our health experts. We're seeing that things are taking place, and that's a positive. And and then that somewhat has not changed. It's just taking time. Hard to deal with that time delay. And I really felt that what's going to help keep on track is doing an exercise like this. I really find that this was a good day starter for me.
Yeah.
And I think the moment to reflect, to do exercise, physical exercise, but also this emotional, mental exercise, as you've described, and then just reaching out, taking the time to reach out. I've had a lot of discussions with maybe some coaches I hadn't really heard from or been in touch with this week, just because of all the circumstances. And so, in a way, that's been a wonderful thing. So I really appreciate what you've been doing for us, Melinda, and I look forward to today's discussion.
Yeah, me too. And today's discussion debated last week which order we should do this in. But I love what you just did. And so today's discussion actually really scaffolds on the work that that you just did and that we discussed last week.
Mm-hmm.
Just on that note, though, of negative influences. So, you know, I love how you called it out. And in this week's coaching tip on my website, I wrote about that should space, because, you know, I too have times where, you know, those negative influences creep in. And so it's not a game of perfect. It's a game of working towards things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll see that in the deck that I prepared this week for everyone.
Okay. Looking forward to it as always.
So this week we're going to look at the 4 types of choices. And why is this important? It's important because if we're aware of these 4 types of choices, then we can start to deal with them. So I have in my coaching practice deciphered these 4 types: autopilot, ignore, reactive, and responsive. So autopilot is, I do what I do just because that's what I do. And a good example of that is brushing your teeth. Ignore is, I know better, but I choose to ignore to do it anyway. And a good example of that is when someone tells you you should do something and you turn around and you just ignore it. Ignore is the second type of choice. And that is when I know better, but I choose to ignore and do it anyway. So a good example of that is when I know that I shouldn't have ice cream at 10 o'clock at night, and I go and have ice cream at 10 o'clock at night. Reactive is when you choose based on the emotions, and they usually are without thought. So it's that amygdala hijack. It's that emotion that comes up, and then you just go and do something. And the emotions are fear, anger, disgust, shame, love, guilt, joy, surprise, sadness, or any iterations of these. So it's based on your feelings. And then responsive is with awareness. I choose what serves me, someone else, or the situation. So I actually take that pause. And Victor Hugo, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, said between the stimulus and the response, there's always a place to pause. And in that place, I have the opportunity to choose. And that really is that responsive choice. Some people struggle with understanding the reactive choice. And so I put this wheel of emotions in here. And I think I use this tool in a lot of different situations. But I think it's really going to help to explain that reactive choice. The 5 major or 6 major emotions they have in the center: joy, love, fear, anger, sadness, and surprise. And then they expand that out. And when you start to look at some of the words, so you may in the moment feel anger, but is that really anger? Or is it irritability? Or is it annoyed? Or is it hostile? And how does that emotion affect the choices that you're making? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's definitely been that type of, we've definitely had that emotions and the feelings. I think we've touched on all that in your wheel today or this week.
Yeah, for sure we have. So just to circle back to that, and I'm going to include this in one of the handouts because I think it's such a good thing to put on your desk and say, in that moment where I'm being reactive, what exactly is the effect of that on the choices that I'm making? And often it's not a good choice. So each of these choices or approaches to choice, I should say, serve a purpose. But there's also a dark side to each of these. So for example, in autopilot, the dark side is that you don't ever pause and think about what you should be doing. Like, what's another way to do this? Because you just go about your day. Ignore is, and I'm going to touch on the mental health aspect a little bit. Ignore is, I know I should reach out to somebody, but I'm going to ignore this and just put my head in the sand. So where sometimes ignore can be good, say, there's a lot of noise going on around you and you have to concentrate, you can ignore the noise. But in this particular case, ignore is not good.
Right.
Reactive is, again, choosing based on emotions. And, that can be both a positive and a negative. And responsive, and this is interesting, people don't realize there's a dark side to the responsive choice. It's that you actually don't make a choice because you pause so long in between and you contemplate all the alternatives that the opportunity to make that responsive choice goes away.
Yeah. I always have to say that you always bring things out, and as you're talking, I'm just thinking and thinking and thinking of my own, how I respond or how I react or how I reflect. And yeah, this is a good. I think the idea of that word pause is always a good one.
Right. As long as you don't pause too long.
That's right. Yes, yes. And sometimes we do get stuck.
Right.
Sit down and that's it. I do pause for a little bit,
Yeah.
but I get back up.
Yes, I know. Okay, so, this is just a visual of these 4 types of choices. And again, it gives you that sense of who actually is in control here.
I like that one picture. I think she's driving. Was that you, Melinda, in the last story you told us?
Yes. That is me. No, that was my younger self.
Your younger self. There you go. That's me getting in the fridge and getting that donut.
Yeah.
That is.
As long as it's not at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, true.
So last week we talked about the influences that can affect me and ultimately the decisions I make. And so, we need to circle back to that a little bit. There's influences that affect your physical body. An example of that was sleep or lack of sleep. Mm-hmm. There's influences that affect your psyche. And, we talked about that being the thoughts and emotions that you have in your head. And an example of that is sadness this week. Mm-hmm. How does that affect the decisions that I'm making? And then there's influences on how I relate to the world. And so all of these 3 areas affect the decisions you make. And you have to be able to step back and think of the choices. What type of choice is appropriate in the particular situation? So because we're in a time of change, it's also important to think about, well, how is change affecting our decisions? So if you're a swim coach, for example, you have a pattern that you've set for years and years. And even though you're a high performance individual, the pattern is still there because it's set up by the system that we live in. So you get up at 4:15, you're in your car, you get to the pool. In Oakville, you get to the pool at 5:15, you get ready to open up at 5:30, and then you run through your systems for the rest of the day. Well, all that's changed now. There's no pool to go to.
Yeah.
And so, all of a sudden, there's a new form of a system that you have to create. And that's something that I think a lot of people are struggling with. I certainly hear about it in my coaching practice. So really understanding what is autonomy. It's that self-direction. It's that I'm directing my own life rather than being directed. And in this time of change, we really have to step up that responsive choice that I'm actually directing everything that I need to get done, because the system is just not there. It's loosely there. I mean, you still have meetings and things like that, but you have a choice to get up every morning, and are you going to get dressed up or are you going to wear the same clothes every day? Mm-hmm. And how does that serve you? if you're trying to feel energized, wearing the same clothes every day doesn't necessarily give you that feeling of energy that you're trying to get.
Yeah. I think when I see this, I'm thinking about what we're experiencing right now, but also as we look forward, that we're going to have to be prepared to manage the changes that that we will experience, such as when we do return to the pool. There's going to be a great many rules and regulations and restrictions, and we have to plan for it. But we definitely need to keep our mindset in a spot that will manage others, not only ourselves as coaches, but our swimmers and even our parents, as we start to move in a more positive direction.
Right. Yeah, and new systems are going to have to be set up.
Yeah.
And with new systems comes new communication patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in tense times, we move to a reactive mode versus a responsive mode.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we're really going to have to work on and think about. How can I be responsive to all these people that really want to get back into the pool and start training again, but also recognize that this new system is in place.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is an important slide because responsive choice is really tough. And your exercise this week looks at pausing and thinking about responsive choice. But it is really tough because in the moment, it's hard to pause.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't sleep last night and you're making a choice that affects a lot of people, are you pausing and saying, am I thinking about, is this the best time to make this choice? Because I'm tired and my mind is a little foggy.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is something that we all have to, there's no perfect in this. It's an awareness around what are the influences that are affecting this choice. And in those influences, can I step outside of them to see how they're affecting me? Thoughts?
Well, this is exactly, I think, when I think about this week, is definitely, there had to be, and I think each day for me there was a pause. There was a little bit more absorbing what's really taken place, and then there's that reflection, and then there's the memories, and then there's this and that and everything else. But I think that pause is very much a very important thing to reset and actually see things a bit clearer.
Right. Right. And, someone in your leadership role has to be the leader in this. I mean, sad, yes. But you also have to think, okay, what is the snowballing effect of this that I need to turn around and make sure that the people that surround me understand that we will get through this,
Mm-hmm.
of which we will.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, just as a reminder here, that choice isn't a game of perfection. It's in the moment of certain choices. It's challenging to pause, but awareness is key. And that the influences that affect our choices are there whether we want to acknowledge them or not. And that the results are affected by the approach you choose and your subsequent actions.
I really like this slide, and I think I mentioned a while back in one of our series where, one of your slides, I thought, that's the perfect thing that needs to be laminated and actually put in the mesh bag, because we know the training times and the goal times are all there. Yeah. And this is like take this card out just when you're about to, have those moments. Just, take that card out and have a look at it. And I think from a coaching point of view, have that card handy in your back pocket as we talk about our strengths, but also have this card just to help reset and see things the way they should be seen, or to see it better anyways.
Right. And it's an interesting thing. I was working with someone yesterday and we were talking about something else. And, I said, we need to figure out how you can bring awareness to this in the moment. And this individual said, well, if my cell phone's in the wrong pocket, then every time I think I go to reach for my cell phone, I realize that it's in the wrong pocket for a reason. And that makes me think about how I can choose differently.
Mm-hmm.
For me, as you'll see on my coaching tip this week, I put my watch on my wrong arm for a week because I was trying to change my language around the word should. And that in itself was a very positive thing for me to have awareness. This watch feels really weird, but it's there for a reason. What is that reason? Oh, and it shifted my behavior dramatically.
Wow, interesting.
So the exercise that I put out for this week is being aware of the influences as you make responsive choices. And so what I said is write down one responsive choice you made in each of the 3 areas listed below for 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
So the physical body, the psyche, and how I relate to the world, and use the information you had from last week to drive that responsive choice.
I think this is great. This is exactly how I think coaches work, athletes are learning, is that you're building to the next week as we talk about training. But sometimes you need to go back and reflect on, or not necessarily reflect on it, but what you've done in the weeks prior will help prepare you for that next week. And actually going through an exercise like this is very much in their wheelhouse. This is the way they roll. And I really do believe that some of these tools, I think all the tools, but I think some of these tools will be quite useful and quite impactful for both swimmer and coach and whoever else wants to be a part of that.
Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, I do this periodically throughout the year. I step back and I say, okay, how are these influences, these positive things that I'm trying to do in my, the positive results that I'm trying to gain in my life? What are the influences that are affecting that? And what are the positive influences that are affecting that? And then write it down. So for me, my physical body, it would be maintaining a go to bed time and a get up time.
Yeah.
That helps my physical body. The psyche is to step back and to, try and think about the positive aspects of what's going on in my world right now. And then how I relate to the world, it's really how do I give the things that I feel I'm good at? How do I give that out, give it back to the world? And so I write down something every day that is a gift to someone else that has no benefit to me other than the bounce back effect of that. And it could be, calling my mother, or it could be doing the Swim Ontario weekly talk.
Now, this is great. This is great stuff.
Great.
Well, I'm going to actually use that. I think, instead of just always talking about these things, I'm actually starting to make use of the little things I've either read or actually some of these tools that you've provided, Melinda, because I think they are, and maybe took me a bit of time to actually realize maybe I need this. And, as we go through this, it's okay to say, I need this, or I need help. I need to ask for some help. I need to reach out. It's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're in uncharted waters that, no matter how much sport has been able to give us to deal with situations, to deal with stresses, to deal with challenges, to deal with disappointments, sometimes they don't come to the surface, and we have to remind ourselves we need to ask for some help. It's okay. It's okay to ask for help.
Being vulnerable is such a strength.
Yeah.
And yet because we've been trained to be tough and to solve
Mm,
our problems and to be a champion, sometimes that persona makes us think that we shouldn't show a weakness.
mhm.
Vulnerability is not a weakness, it is a strength.
Yes.
And when you admit that you need help and you ask for help, it gives you this sense of, wow, like I am human and I can ask for help. And when people respond to that, it's such a feeling of community, and
Mhm.
people will respond to it.
Yeah.
So it's tough out there right now. Like, I mean, we all have these days where we go, okay, here I go again.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
you don't have, if you're an extrovert and you don't have that interaction that you're so used to,
Yeah.
it's really tough.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we're hungry for. We're hungry for that, whatever we feel is our normal. We're hungry for it. We have to find other ways to satisfy that hunger. But at the same time, know that there's there's people out there that have our backs, and there's organizations. There's friends that maybe I haven't talked to for a while. I've experienced that over the last couple of weeks, which has been fun. And and just think about all the people that are important. And this week is National Volunteer Week, and
Mhm.
give a little bit of shout out to all the volunteers that are part of this great sport,
Right.
and all the volunteers who are on the front lines, who are not paid employees but are volunteering their time to help out. I know that our board of director, our president, Ann Bell, is continues to volunteer at the Red Cross blood donation, one of the centers there. And so this is, when you think of things like that, so shout out to all the volunteers this week. It is
Right.
National Volunteer Week. So and that's what it is. You ask and you receive, and it's pretty interesting to how that comes out when you just take a moment and pause and just look at things.
Yeah, it's all about awareness. When you
Absolutely.
realize that helping other people actually helps you more
Yeah. Yeah,
inside of you,
it's absolutely right. Yeah.
it just, you'd never do it to boost your own feelings of well-being, but the bounce back effect is so
Mhm.
significant. And
Yeah.
so absolutely a shout out to the volunteers.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Melinda. Like I found is that going back and just reviewing a little bit of what you've provided over the last couple of weeks helps. It's a reminder. You almost have to circle back a little bit. And the great thing about this is it's recorded. It's there at any moment that someone needs to take time to up their game. We'll call it up their game as we
Right.
as we do get to the point where we can return to sport or return to play.
Yep.
And I'm a firm believer of this, is that as tough as things are and as how much this is impacting negatively, I think it will impact positively if we work towards that as down the road and in the future.
Yep. Keep working hard and
Yeah,
it will, keep
yeah,
hope and keep working hard.
that's right. Well, thank you very much, Melinda.
Excellent. Look forward to our conversation next week.
Absolutely.
Thanks.